What else I find in my unpacking, packing phase?
I don't want to hear about you packing.
Oh, I'll be back. Here we go.
I feel like Elmer Fudd and that wascally wabbit should have been creeping along the front. Good morning. Thank you all for braving this terrible storm, or not, that hadn't started yet. My name is Paul Dalzell, and I am the worship coordinator of this, the Unitarian Universalist congregation. Welcome all of you, our members, our friends, and this is not anyone's first time here, so I'm not going to thank them too. We are the place, as a wise man once told me. If you don't feel you fit in anywhere else, you belong here. We come together as a community to do good and to be better. To do good, a part of our belief system is that collective social justice work is crucial to who we are as a religious people. To be better, to develop ourselves to be better humans, kinder, gentler, and more open. As the Zen Buddhists say, each of you is perfect just the way you are, and you could use a little improvement. I can tell you exactly when I realized I was a humanist. It was the morning after April 15th, 2013. April 15th is the date of the Boston Marathon bombing. And that next morning is when I decided humans were good. How, you might ask? How could two people doing something so terrible make me believe in the innate goodness of people? Two bombs were set off at 2:49 p.m., right at the finish line of the marathon. The explosions killed 3 civilians and injured 264 others. That was terrible. What struck me, though, especially that next morning, were the stories and the images. The stories of runners turning from the race to run to area hospitals to donate blood. The photos and videos of dozens of people running toward the blasts. As the dust and debris were still rising in the air, spectators moving amidst the devastation to help those who were injured. And later, the tales of hundreds of Bostonians opening their homes to the marathoners because the city was on lockdown and they could not leave. And thousands of people across the country donating blood because that was all they could do. Two brothers doing something awful in the name of religion. Thousands and thousands of people doing whatever they could to help. Yes, I believe most people are good, mostly. Yes, I believe that if we as a species are going to advance, are going to thrive, are going to be all we can be, we need to do it together as humans. I am a humanist. Let's take a moment to beginning our announcements to thank all the volunteers and staff who work to make Sundays happen. Some of them were thrust in the position this morning. Thank you, Jack. Thanks to our music coordinator, Jamie Edwards, and the UUC music makers for the work they do to bring us joy. I would also like to thank our tech masters, Paul and Maddie, as they strive for excellence in the quality of both the sound in this room and online, and in bringing those at home a better, richer view of our worship service. And as always, a big thank you to our congregational administrator, Sarah Stone, for her patience and talent in organizing these facilities, keeping us informed, and keeping this community of caring counterculture congregants operating. Today's service is being live streamed. Yes. We were afraid it was going to be on Neil's phone, but I guess we've got it going here. Is that correct? Yay! It will then be available for viewing shortly after it ends on YouTube. We have some other improvements on the way that we have not decided on yet, but stay tuned. Please rest assured that we are doing all we can to bring you and our viewers at home a high-quality worship service. Today, the Roots and Shoots Religious Exploration Group will not be meeting. Carol was unable to come today. She's under the weather, and she will get in touch with the kids that usually come on project stuff to do this week. This Thursday, January 9th, Spiral Moon Grove will be learning about poppets and their magical use. They will also be making protection poppets. Please come to join the fun. And now, as Deborah lights our chalice, I will read our chalice lighting words. Let us prepare our hearts and minds for this time together. Hear these excerpted words from the late Unitarian Universalist minister, Andrew Backus. Can you do it? Teamwork works. Come in from the cold. Make yourself a religious home, if only for these brief moments in spite of time, which will soon bear us away from each other. Make this a family. Treat us as your own. If only in this space, which we can make sacred by our connections here, come on in. Make yourselves a home, sing and love life. And now please rise in body, spirit, and voice as you are able for a hymn for gathering, which is number 93, To Mercy, Pity, Peace, and Love.
Return their thankful
come to this place of sanctuary, whether in person or virtually, to connect with the greater good, to do good and to be better. Part of sharing what is of worth is sharing our joys, our celebrations, our sorrows, our concerns, our peace, our help, and our needs. We have a joy for the Bob Dylan movie at the Marquee. Hey. Was it good? Yeah. Good. Wonderful. Sorrow is that the computer went down naturally at 5 minutes until 11. But they got it up. Thank you, Neil, Paul, and Maddie. Also a joy for taking action. This Thursday, I will be joining others for our first meeting of the Deportation Defense Rapid Response Network. It's a grassroots group coming together to resist the threat of mass deportations by the upcoming administration. And also a concern for all those who are homeless in this bitter winter weather, and for the hearts of those who condemn them and make their lives harder. Our introduction to the offering today is a greater good for ourselves and our world by former minister here, Kayla Parker. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. May this be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation. May we give in love and in hope.
So forgive me if I mess up, but I'm trying to read music from a tablet and be in the current. So.
Oh, you are? Okay. Please join me in reading our unison affirmation. The words are in your order of service. Love is the spirit of our faith, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our meditation and response today was recorded earlier by Reverend Don.
Hello, you friends in the sanctuary and online. If we haven't met, my name is Reverend Don Rollins. I serve the congregation as contract minister. As always, I'm glad to be with you, even in recorded form. I miss your energy, I miss your eyes. During our monthly remote services, it's a whole different deal. But here's what I know about these services. I know that they are part of your bonds. I know that you actually like each other. I know that you work together. So it's the bonds that bring you to that room. It's the bonds that matter in that room, no matter how far away I am. Remotely or in person, the now matters. Right now matters. Not just because we want to practice being in the moment, but because we are in a moment as a nation and therefore as a world. We're inching closer and closer to what will surely be a time of trouble, even danger, in the wake of last November's election results. So it's all the more important that we take care of ourselves and then one another, and then the planet that nurtures us and holds us. So today's meditation is really part silence, it's part story, and then part reflection. So often I ask you to come to ground and come to ground with me. Settle in. Feel the tension that you brought with you today. See where it is. Your body is telling you something right now. Have that conversation. See where the stress is. Now go there. Recognize it. As we move further into the meditation, it may help you if you close your eyes as you listen, or find a focal point other than my face on the screen. Insert your own joke right there. Either way, let your thoughts, let your feelings come as they will, because this is your time. It's a quiet time with people who care for you. They see you. They hold you. This is a quiet time with people you care for. It's just that simple. So join me in the silence. Hold that space and that relaxed place as we move into a story and then a reflection. Continue to listen to your body. Continue to watch your breath. "32 years ago this month, I was sharing a large telescope with the discoverer of Pluto, Clyde Tombaugh. Clyde and Patsy, his spouse, they were longtime members with our congregation in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Very patient folk, especially with a newly minted interim minister. Clyde and Patsy were somehow able to put that telescope in their front yard, an instrument that took up a large swath of that front yard, undoubtedly the only one the city council had ever approved. For a few minutes, my world was reduced to a telescope, Clyde, and the desert sky he knew like the back of his hand. It was a pure moment, a pure wonder. As I recall, somebody had to pry me off of that seat so the next person could come feel the joy. Continue to breathe. Today I'll talk about humanism, not just as an idea, but as a way to live. The discoverer of Pluto was a humanist by conviction. I knew something about his path. I know he did not start with a humanist perspective, but I do know that's where it ended. My shift with the church was over before Clyde died in 1997. In 2006, his ashes were placed in a simple aluminum can and sent into the galaxy as part of the New Horizons space mission. God rest Clyde and Patsy. And with that magic in mind, if you can imagine what it would be like to sit in that chair with Clyde, see with him now the galaxy itself, the galaxy that is now his home. From my colleague David Bumbaugh, we are in the making still. We are time and the universe and the generations. We are one and all reaching for an unformed possibility, a vision we only half see, only half understood. Because like the universe, we are in the making still. And here in this community of hope and memory, we celebrate this universe, our home. We celebrate with Clyde the promise of an unfinished world. And here we reach out to each other, call each other to faithfulness, remind each other of the vast possibilities hidden deep in each of us. Out of the stars we have come. The elements of our bodies were fused in the heart of dying stars. The warmth of our bodies is the fire of those stars, tamed to the uses of life. Out of the stars we have come. Out of dreams we were born. We are the dreams others dreamed, the outworking of their struggles, the reward of their faithfulness. So we are the dream curled in the seed that they planted. Out of dreams were we born. Join me again in the silence. And come back now to this moment. Be with us here under that vast canopy of the universe that Clyde loves so much. Hello again, everyone. What I have for you today fits in the category of one of three ways to do messages, and this is the third. One is mystical, in which the congregation comes to ground and experiences the holy all by themselves and together. The second is inspirational, where we have touchstones about what keeps us going, what keeps us together, and what lies before us. And I'm certainly going to do that later in the month when I come to visit you in person on the eve of Trump's return. The third is history, and that's where I want to go this morning. So think of this as homework. For those of you who are not historian types, this is about homework, finding out where one of our most proud religious traditions comes from. Among the most vocal opponents to the Unitarian theology of his day, we're talking mid to late 1800s, was the Reverend Francis Ellingwood Abbott, an early champion for religious humanism in our denominations. Abbott was a study in personal theological change. He was a Harvard Seminary grad. He was trained in the structured and dry Unitarian Christianity of his day. But not long into his first ministry, It was clear his answers to life's questions just weren't holding up. And so the God of his life to date had become tidy, had become distant and beyond reason. So like Ralph Waldo Emerson before him, Abbott tried to live out his emerging beliefs without leaving our ministry. And he was not alone with all the soul searching and the personal anguish. A number of his Unitarian colleagues were also struggling, some already calling for a secular and godless theology. Abbott was not alone. But Abbott eventually arrived at a middle path, a place where his supernatural God was gone, but not the things that made him human, how he loved, how he experienced loneliness, the mystery that surrounded him, the sorrow. He was not the secular humanism of his upper Midwestern colleagues. Abbott did not want to abandon religion. He wanted to rethink religion. So he sought a middle way, a way that was grounded in science, grounded in reason, but open to all those experiences beyond science and beyond reason. The place we call soul, the place we call wonder. Abbott's journey to this new to him path began in seminary. So by the time he accepted a call to First Unitarian Society of Christians, Dover, New Hampshire, he was already on a theological island. His stale God was gone, but not that hole in his heart where that God used to live. So like the rest of us, he was asking the question, what to believe when belief doesn't work anymore? Abbott's church members did not much care for a minister in such open struggle, nor did the greater Unitarian movement. But things went from bad to worse for Francis Ellingwood Abbott when word of his radical, very public theology spread all the way to the highest court in the state of New Hampshire. Tried before the bar, he was deemed seedy, insufficiently Christian, on public par with those scoundrels Jefferson and Thomas Paine. There were two sermons in evidence against Abbott. The first in which Abbott denied Jesus' unique divinity. He had the nerve to compare Jesus to Confucius or Zoroaster or Moses or Jesus or Muhammad, and that you and I were just as holy as these. For him, Jesus was our sibling. He was not our Savior. The second excerpt placed before the court that came from a sermon in 1868 in which Abbott decided that America is every bit as holy as Judea. Every place, every inch, everywhere is holy land. Every word of truth is a holy Bible. So the court took little time to rule on this wayward minister. They decided that if Protestantism would include Mr. Abbott, then it might as well include the rest of the heretics like Thomas Jefferson, and by the same rule also Thomas Paine, who was once called that infamous blasphemer. Abbott was broken of heart after this ruling, but not of spirit. He'd lost his church, his denomination, his way of making a living, but he went on, and he went on to co-found the Free Religious Association. This was a group of non-theistic Unitarian churches and ministers. And he went an extra step. He became a humanist editor of a humanist newspaper, the first such in America. Abbott was by no means the only Unitarian minister of his era to court trouble for mixing religion with reason. His was not the only pulpit taken away for preaching the core humanist principle, and here it is. There's nobody there to shield us from the choices we make. In modern terms, we are the ones we've been waiting for. And just one more observation about Abbott's theology. His was a growing and mature humanism. It was not satisfied to talk about what wasn't true, to leave it at the negative. That's not what he was about, at least as I read his writings. That was easy humanism. That was a distortion of a dear tradition with something to affirm, not just discount. Now, if you there in the sanctuary or online know much about Unitarian Universalism, you know that for the last century plus, humanism has been our dominant belief system, secular humanism in particular. That translates to 4 generations of UUs, some within, most without, that have entered a denomination they equated with secular humanism. Not everywhere, not all the time, but most everywhere, most all of the time. But yet, in my 4 decades as a UU religious humanist, rarely have I come across ministers and congregations willing to take a deep dive into humanism, where it came from, what it's about, and where it's going. So 3 things I want to do here. First, I want to take you on a whirlwind ride on the roots and branches of humanism. Second, talk about how humanism found its way into our historically Christian fold. And 3, how a newish version is changing the face of our denomination. So we're going to run a little long. Stay with me. Today's humanism has an amazing backstory, one we can trace across 7 different related but distinct forms, and I'm going to borrow here from my late colleague John Weston to tell you about them. Humanism in the Western world can be traced to the Renaissance period, and here we're talking roughly between the 14th and 17th centuries. It started out as an approach to education, what we now call the humanities, language, art, politics. And the goal here was to transform the world through ideas and education. Now, 2 related schools branched off the Renaissance period: Christian humanism, classical humanism. Christian humanism was much less focused on dogma and creeds, emphasizing a loving God, a fully human Jesus. It began when the Renaissance moved into the church. As to classical humanism, it was really a deeper version of the one begun during the Renaissance, with even more emphasis on politics and arts. Think about the constitutional framers, who saw themselves as being part of this new Renaissance period. Now, over time, the classical thinking of the elite reached the less privileged, mostly through universities. It was a secular, individualist humanism. This is the 4th thread of humanism, often called cultural or populist. While humanism was developing on these shores, a 5th humanism was taking shape across Europe, humanistic psychology. Developed in the late 1800s, humanistic psychology ran counter to Freud and his psychoanalytic approach. And here it was about each person's story, not about the theory that brought them to counseling. Now, it's the last 2 forms of humanism I want to emphasize before I put you non-history folks totally to sleep: religious and secular. Both began by rejecting supernatural claims, embracing science. But whereas religious humanism wanted to transform religion and hear my friend's Abbott's voice across the generations, secular humanism found little or nothing there worth salvaging. In other words, the religious humanists began using familiar terms in unfamiliar ways. Meanwhile, the secular humanists saw religion as irrelevant, if not harmful. The takeaway so far isn't and never was only about atheism, agnosticism, or secularism. Like our movement, humanism is a very big tent, and we ought to look a little broader. Let's talk about how we got here. There's no agreement as to when humanism became the centerpiece of liberal religious thought, but I'm going to go with the transcendentalist crowd, and here's why. A full 50 years before Abbott and his fellow troublemakers were rattling denominational chains, there was Margaret Fuller, Henry David Thoreau, and Ralph Waldo Emerson, and other transcendentalists that had famously declared mainstream Unitarianism corpse cold dead, beyond saving. They criticized institutional religion, most especially that coming out of Boston, then and now our headquarters, during the 1820s and 30s. The Transcendentalists, with their theology of God in nature, did not bring the American Unitarian Association to its knees, but they did cast a mold for how to shake things up. The AUA would never be the same. Move ahead with me now to the Civil War era of Francis Ellingwood Abbott and the rest of those mid-century Unitarian humanist preachers. On the heels of Transcendentalism came Darwin's The Origins of the Species and evolution theory. Meanwhile, liberal biblical scholars were overturning assumptions begun a mere 50 years after Jesus died. They were taking on the church canons from the 300s. And as with every religious tradition, Unitarians and Universalists were trying to figure out who they were in the wake of such evil known as the American Civil War. So all these events, when combined, would lead us to what became known as the Western issue. Plug here, fascinating part of our history. The Western issue was essentially a theological tug of war between established, still Christian-centered Unitarianism and that second wave of humanist dissenters. At the center of the controversy was what Abbott had earlier called free religion. That was a term later embraced by Midwestern Unitarian clergy. It called for rejecting supernaturalism. It called for rejecting statements of faith, including Unitarian or otherwise, and biblical authority. Despite denominational pressure to dial back their efforts, these mostly Midwestern clergy all but left the fold, and this time took some of their churches with them. Clearly, humanism had gained a foothold. In his 1876 book, The Faith of Evolution, Unitarian Mr. Minot Savage wrote an essay distilling what these mostly secular humanists were preaching. He wrote, "Now what is this strange theory? Simply this, that the whole universe, suns, planets, moons, our earth, every form of life upon it, vegetable and animal, up to humans, together with all our civilizations, has developed from primitive fire mist. This humanism calls for no unknown agency. It does not offer to explain a natural fact by a miracle, which will only deepen the mystery it attempts to solve. It says, I accept and ask for only the forces that are going on right before my eyes, and these I will explain with the visible universe." Friends, this was hardcore secular humanism. By the early 1930s, humanism had become the theological wedge issue of its time in our denomination, championed again by some Midwestern Unitarian ministers. Humanism now took the international stage, and in 1933, with the publication of a Humanist Manifesto, things were about to rock again in Unitarian and Universalist circles. A Humanist Manifesto. It included the signatures of a number of Unitarian ministers and asserted that human beings are part of an evolutionary process. Science, not religion, is the basis for deciding what's true. Within 4 years of the publication of a Humanist Manifesto, the AUA, American Unitarian Association, elected Frederick May Elliott as president. Elliott was himself a liberal theist, but he read the writing on the wall. Humanism was on its way in. Less than a decade later, another World War challenged Unitarians and Universalists to account for evil on a massive scale. Once again, Unitarianism To an increasing degree, universalism. Look to God, look to humans, not God, for cause and cure. World War II shook up every bit of faith we could muster as Unitarians and Universalists, and we were changed. So by the time the Universalists merged with the Unitarians in 1961, Unitarians especially identified humanism as the main way of experiencing life. Once in place, humanism was for the next 50 years left relatively unchallenged as our worldview of choice. Surveys from those decades indicate secular humanism had all but eclipsed other ways to be a Unitarian Universalist. Stay with me, I know. From the 1930s until the 1980s, rationalists were solidly at the center in every major region of North America, although a little less so in New England. We were in many ways now a humanist denomination. It's here that UU minister Fred Muir challenges the idea that once in place, humanism did not need improving. He wrote, the civil turmoil, the strife of the 1960s and 1970s, as well as what he called the navel-gazing of the 1980s, left the baby boomers especially, but not exclusively, looking for something other than Cold War neo-Protestantism of the 1950s and 60s. As the church in general lost its appeal and members during the 1960s and 70s, and we did, so too the Unitarian Universalist humanism that had sustained us for so many years. Long way of saying, and Fred is right, that as we trace our history into the late 20th century, clearly humanism, Unitarian Universalist style, had lost its sense of curiosity and its openness. If this is hard to get your head around, think about the marginalization of our UU pagans, UU mystics, UU Christians, especially our UU Christians. It was time to turn the page again. We did, and thankfully we still are. It's clear that humanism is, like the greater movement, undergoing another shift, not in humanism's core commitment to reason and science as path to truth, but as part of our association's ongoing, overarching transition to a more welcoming, more open, more mature religious option. Fellow humanists, take some deep breaths. There is no instance in which liberal religion will forsake what those early Midwestern humanist preachers called the 3 R's: reason, rationality, and responsibility. But we cannot be surprised that more recent generations of religious humanists find our secular-only congregations and ministers narrow-minded, out of touch, and worst of all, boring. It's a generational thing, yeah, but it's more than that. Research with our millennial and Gen Z UUs tells us it's time we take stock of the whiter white supremacy culture that permeates how we worship, how we organize, how we prioritize, how we lead, how we do justice work, and yes, how we think of our theologies and philosophies. It was inevitable that sooner or later we would have to ask ourselves some tough questions about humanism as it has been practiced at every level of our association. Some of you know, those discussions became front and center nearly a decade ago now, beginning with how and what key leaders are chosen, our hiring practices, whom do we empower? Time doesn't allow for all the details, but the bottom line is this: a new humanism is emerging. It is less strict, it is less strident, it is less classist, it is less dismissive of other ways to be a UU. It is, in a few words, confident in its own beliefs, secure in its own beliefs. does not need to go picking fights with other ways to be a UU. Now, although I am now 2.5 years from full-time interim ministry, I do keep an ear and an eye out for the changes in our UU humanist communities. Here's a side note for you. Just as there are caucus communities for UU Jews, pagans, Christians, Buddhists, and more, there is the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association. Do a search or go to the UUA website. So how can longtime humanists like me be allies for the inevitable changes that are underway? Some observations. First, we're overdue for taking a loving but honest look about what is and isn't essential to modern humanism. The term deconstruction has been around for a while now, and now I think it's time we apply it to the beloved tradition we call home, our humanism. Second, this shift is generational and more. At some point, and here we go, we boomers and elders, we have to recognize that we belong to a different time. We were shaped by different influences. We can indeed learn new tricks, but that means we have to put ourselves in a position to reverse roles, to listen deeply. We rightly focus on our roles as sages, and we should, but less so our roles as curious learners. So let's focus on that part, the curiosity. Because if we don't, there is a cost. We lose the opportunity to connect with some very wise, very precious, very fun people. Let us not come off as proverbial Karens, waiting to see who's on our lawn and how to chase them off, because that was never our lawn to begin with. Third, the emerging humanism is a throwback to our friend and mentor, Francis Ellingwood Abbott, not just his own deconstruction of the Christian faith, but the grief that came with the burial later on of his beloved Catherine. His humanism got him through for a while. This is a more mature humanism, folks. It is zeroed in on each of the stories we have to tell, and they are not all humanist. It is a softer, more humble, more beyond distancing ourselves way of being in the world, because I cannot be offended when you tell me you're a UU Christian. I am a witnessing UU humanist. As a matter of fact, we can click our heels and jump in the air because we are finally reaching the diversity we were hoping to get a long time ago. And better yet, says this more mature humanism, tell me about what keeps you up at night and tell me what faith gets you up in the morning. That's the meeting place between humanism and everybody else. So my fellow UU humanists, we have nothing to lose and everything to gain from this fluid state of affairs. The marks of the 7 sources of humanism are all over this new way to present and live them out. All we got to do is step back a little and see this with our new eyes. God rest those who have brought humanism to this point. It is so rich and so worth telling about. Thanks again for listening to a long sermon.
Let's grab a hymnal. Music makers, take your places and sing another song, shall we? Yeah. Number 288 in your hymnals.
Wait, did you press the button?
I did not.
Oh, good, don't.
I won't.
288.
All our good
from one of our strongest preachers, abolitionists, and transcendentalists, Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living.
And please sing as you wish to We Are a Gentle Angry People, the first verse 2 times. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Thank you,
That was
folks.
good. I like that service.